Written by John Wyndham and published in 1955, The Chrysalids is a science fiction novel that we will look into in the duration of this video. The four major concepts we're going to go over are themes, conflicts, issues, as well as figurative language that are embedded deep within the text. The Chrysalids is set in a post-apocalyptic world and is a result of a nuclear spill. Narrated in the first-person point of view and protagonist, David Storm. Living in a land where genetic conformity is the will of God and any minor quirk or full-body distortion can cost one's life, David faces both mental and physical obstacles when he discovers he is mentally different with telepathic abilities. And he isn't alone. What's worse is when his younger sister joins the club, but with larger capabilities. An idea or an underlying meaning of a literary work that may be stated directly or indirectly is known as a theme. The first theme I uncovered in John Wyndham's novel was the power of love. Love was a very substantial part in the novel. Often it dictated the actions of major and minor characters, for better or for worse. For the better, we can see this in the unconditional love Sophie's parents had for her. Because they loved her so much, they saw past through her extra toes and did what was best for her. They isolated themselves from the rest of the society, and in the moment her secret was made known, they didn't hesitate in leaving. They protected her and was still willing to continue raising her. There was also Aunt Harriet's love for her baby. Aunt Harriet had the difficulty of conceiving a child with no abnormalities whatsoever. The same time she had her third child, Petra, was born. She asked her sister, Emily Storm, also David's mother, if they could switch babies for the time being so her deviated child could receive the certificate after an inspection. She knew her chances were slim to none, and her prediction was right. The following day her body was found in the river. Her love for her baby was so strong she had asked her sister and brother-in-law, who are enforcers of the law, to commit a crime. It made her recognize how intoxicated the Whacknock religion really is. For the worst, we can see that in Anne's betrayal towards the Think-Shape group. She knew the concept of marriage was unattainable, for she too was a deviation, but she envied the idea of being in love. Thinking her love was pure, she felt the need to inform Alan of her and the group's abilities. This cost Anne her life as well as her husband's, but endangered the rest. This theme heavily applies to me and my life. Certain times I act more towards my love for my family, but occasionally I would choose my friends over them. In my personal opinion, I relate more towards Anne's behavior towards the power of love, minus the death and endangering others part. This is because her love was selfish. She was only thinking about her need for love, and in a way I relate to that by choosing myself over my family and my friends. The second theme I established was that the quest for power could lead to blinding cruelty. Joseph Storm would be a prime example of this theme. Having an imperious demeanor from the very beginning, it wasn't much of a surprise. Though I can understand why he would act this way, just like he is to David, his father must have had a great influence on him. Joseph held the position of being the leader of the so-called pure community. Over time, and with much respect from his people, he grew the sense of worthiness that could be described as godlike. This came to me when he pursued that he had the right to end any life that he believes to be in any sort of violation with his religion. His behavior towards these body distortion explains his want for power because he feared the unknown. For example, when a new form of aberration was discovered when Catherine and Sally got captured, I suspected they would be put to death, for they were in violation of the greatest offense, imitating the form of God but not functioning the way he intended to, thus deceiving the people. Instead, he wanted to learn about them. He didn't like the fact that he wasn't aware that deviations could exist mentally and he couldn't control them at all. His quest for power also got the best of his temper, hitting David with no remorse for being in contact with Sophie that an officer had to motion for him to stop. Although he wasn't paid much attention to, there was also a second force behaving this way. That would be Joseph's brother, also known as Spider-Man. He was a leader of the Fringe Society and acted the same but less powerful like Joseph. He expressed his desire for power by launching an attack on the Whacknock Society. His desire for power eventually led him to taking Joseph Storm's life. In relation to this theme, I too had some quite unfortunate encounters with the power and its consequences. Not to this extent though. Having three sisters and being the second competing with the eldest sister, we would have some physical and verbal battles here and there, nothing too serious. The third and final theme that was very crucial and repeated was the ugliness discrimination was accompanied by. This was in the form of appearances resulting from religion. From the very beginning to the end, and even in the back of the book, we learned that Whacknock is a place of firm beliefs that can't be tested. By that, I mean their society wasn't very lenient towards diversity. This was in the way they casted out people with an extra toe to where death can be normalcy. We can see that from being very confined and narrow-minded, it only causes society grief and with time hatred. Old Jacob was a product of this lifestyle. The larger amount of time he was exposed to this way of thinking, the more he grew hatred towards the opposing party. He once told David that he wanted to go back to the day where they burned all the mutants, that sending them away and allowing them to live was a cause of his crop's inability to survive. Creating this barrier between the Whacknook and the Fringes, it only created hatred and from that evil doings. For example, when the Fringes would come and raid their supplies, citizens would be irritated and furious. But what can they expect? They sent them out without the necessary necessities to live. The barrier also tore families apart. It tore apart David's relationship with his father and his father's relationship with his brother that only resulted to death. This also applies to Emily and Aunt Harriet's bond. As the world becomes more diverse, the more people can relate to this theme and learn from it. I know I relate to it because I am a colored person. Based on the era the Chrysalids was published in, I believe the main issue that it raises has something to do with the war that was going on. By the time John Wyndham was starting to write modified science fiction, the Cold War was in full effect, which explains the overall theme of discrimination. The Cold War was a product of World War II, which is where the theme derives from. It refers a lot about true image and only they shall live, reminding me of a similar behavior found in the one and only Hitler, creating barriers, sending people to exile, killing the impure race.